On October 7, 2023, the flames of war suddenly erupted in Israel, in the Middle East. The Gaza Strip, located in southwestern Israel, has long been controlled by the Palestinian armed group Hamas. From here, Hamas militants launched over 3,000 rockets and projectiles into Israel. On the same day, Hamas infiltrated Israel through various means, attacking a music festival in southern Israel and several villages, killing a large number of civilians and taking hostages. It is known that, as of now, over 1,400 Israelis have been killed by these militants, with hundreds more taken hostage and brought to Gaza. In response to Hamas's attack, Israel's retaliatory airstrikes have also caused significant civilian casualties in Gaza. Thus, a new cycle of conflict has erupted in the Middle East, the Israel-Hamas conflict. Since Hamas does not represent all Muslims living in Palestine, referring to it as the Israel-Hamas conflict, rather than the Israel-Palestine conflict, is more accurate. The Palestinians are, in fact, Arabs native to the land of Palestine today. The vast majority are Sunni Muslims, one of the two main branches of Islam. Their language is a local dialect of the Levant region, east of the Mediterranean. Since the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, the Israel-Palestine conflict has persisted almost without pause. Facing this large-scale attack from Hamas, Israel was initially unprepared. After the heavy shock, they quickly organized a counteroffensive and, a day later, officially declared war on Hamas. Will the current chaos in the Middle East lead to a greater catastrophe? Could this be a harbinger of a larger-scale world war? These are concerns shared by many today. Today, we will seek answers from ancient prophecies, Israel's prophecies about the war of the end times. Greetings, everyone. In the Bible, the current location of Israel was known in ancient times as the land of Canaan. In the Old Testament, it is the promised land that Jehovah, the God of Israel, granted to Abraham, the ancestor of Israel, a land flowing with milk and honey. Yet, why has this land been engulfed in relentless gunfire for nearly 80 years? Beyond the perspectives of religion, geopolitics, and long-standing historical grievances, today we will explore another angle, biblical prophecy, to analyze the reasons behind this chaos and assess whether this could indeed be a sign of an apocalyptic war. The story begins in the 7th century BCE, over 2,600 years ago. This was the era when Greece entered its classical period, and the Athenian civilization rose. At the location of modern-day Israel, there existed a kingdom called Judah. In the 7th century BCE, the king of Judah was Josiah, a highly regarded ruler. Not only did he fulfill his duties with noble character, but he also strictly adhered to the laws given by Jehovah to the prophet Moses. The kingdom of Judah was part of the ancient United Kingdom of Israel, which existed from the time of King David to King Solomon. However, after Solomon's reign, the ancient kingdom of Israel split into two, the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. By the 7th century BCE, the Neo-Assyrian Empire rose in Western Asia and conquered the northern kingdom of Israel. Judah, under King Josiah's rule, remained an independent state. At that time, Judah was surrounded by powerful empires, Babylon to the east, Assyria to the north, and Egypt to the west. Judah was a small player among giants, a small nation with a modest population in a highly volatile security environment, much like Israel today. Upon ascending the throne, King Josiah harbored ambitions to reclaim the northern territories lost to Assyria and achieve a great national revival. In 622 BCE, a significant event occurred in Judah. In a respected family, a boy named Ezekiel was born, the central figure in our story today. Time passed quickly, and by 609 BCE, the Babylonian Empire suddenly waged war against Assyria. King Josiah saw an opportunity to reclaim the ancient territories of Israel lost to Assyria by aligning with Babylon in their war against Assyria. Assyria, however, was no pushover and had a powerful ally, Egypt. As Babylon fiercely attacked Assyria, Egypt received a plea for help. Pharaoh led a large army to assist. Unexpectedly, as the Egyptian army passed through Judah, they were intercepted by Judah's forces, led by King Josiah himself. Pharaoh, showing no restraint, ordered his army to charge. Despite Josiah's towering ambition, the military disparity was overwhelming. Judah's army fought bravely but was ultimately crushed by Egypt's chariots. King Josiah died in battle. This king, with dreams of national revival, had a will as high as the heavens but a fate as fragile as paper. His grand vision of restoration vanished with his death. Yet, the war continued. Pharaoh, after his victory, pressed on to Assyria but was defeated by a vigorous Babylonian army lying in wait. Assyria, deprived of external aid, was swiftly destroyed by Babylon, which emerged as the new hegemon of the Middle East. That same year, Ezekiel, now 13, suddenly gained the gift of prophecy, speaking of the East. Egypt, humiliated by defeat, returned home in anger. Passing through Judah again, Pharaoh, frustrated by gaining nothing from his long journey, installed a new king, turning Judah into a vassal state of Egypt. Forced to pay regular tribute, Judah, once an ally of Babylon, became Egypt's vassal in the blink of an eye. This was intolerable for Babylon, the recent victor, which could not allow a neighboring Jewish state to obey its enemy. A small nation caught between great powers faces an uncertain fate, safe in the morning, uncertain by evening, with no room for error. One wrong move could spell eternal ruin. King Josiah's rash decision to join the great powers' war had gambled the fate of himself and his nation, setting the stage for Israel's turbulent path in the decades that followed. In 598 BCE, Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar besieged Jerusalem, extracting significant tribute and taking many members of the Jewish royal family, nobles, priests, and artisans as captives. 11 years later, he sacked Jerusalem again, destroying the first temple and taking more captives and wealth back to Babylon. In Jewish history, this is known as the Babylonian captivity. Among those taken was Ezekiel, the figure we mentioned earlier. However, the ancient Babylonians treated their Jewish captives more humanely than Hamas does today. By then, Ezekiel had become a respected priest and prophet. During his exile, he prophesied for 22 years. These prophecies were later compiled into the Book of Ezekiel. This collection of prophecies is among the most enigmatic in the Old Testament, difficult to comprehend and even more profound than Moses parting the Red Sea with his staff. It is said that only Jews over 30 were allowed to read it, as younger readers might struggle to grasp its meaning. The opening of the book of Ezekiel describes a mystical event like this. Ezekiel recounted that in the 5th year of his exile in Babylon, one day while he was by the river Chebar, the heavens suddenly opened. He witnessed a marvelous vision and heard the voice of Jehovah, the God of Israel, speaking to him. A spiritual hand of God touched him. Looking around, Ezekiel felt a powerful wind blowing from the north. Then, in the sky, a fiery cloud appeared, surrounded by a radiant light. The fire glowed intensely, and at its center, something resembling gleaming amber shone brightly. Upon closer inspection, Ezekiel saw 4 living creatures within the fiery light. He could only describe them as living creatures, because he didn't know what they were. Later biblical scholars would suggest that what Ezekiel saw were likely intelligent angelic beings. These living creatures had a unique appearance, with bodies resembling humans. Each had 4 faces, similar to the 4-faced deities often seen in ancient Indian iconography. They had 2 pairs of wings on their backs, and their legs were straight, with feet like the hooves of a calf, gleaming like polished bronze. Their 4 faces, from left to right, were those of a human, a lion, an eagle, and an ox. The 4 wings were divided into 2 pairs. One pair covered the front of their bodies, shielding human-like arms, while the other pair spread out behind them. When these creatures moved, they went straight in any direction without turning. Their bodies were enveloped in fire, with lightning bolts flashing from within. They darted back and forth swiftly, like lightning. Upon closer observation, Ezekiel noticed that each massive creature was accompanied by a wheel. These wheels, sparkling like green chrysolite gems, had a structure as if a wheel were within another wheel. Their rims were covered with eyes. As the creatures moved, the wheels moved with them, for the spirit of the creatures was in the wheels. Above the heads of the living creatures was something like a dome, shining like crystal. Beneath the dome, the creatures' wings produced a sound like rushing waters. Above the dome was what appeared to be a throne, resembling blue sapphire. On the throne sat a figure with a human-like appearance. Ezekiel noticed that from the waist down, this figure was surrounded by something like glowing amber, enveloped in fire that radiated intense light. Seeing this, Ezekiel was certain, the one seated on the throne was Jehovah, the God of Israel. Overwhelmed, Ezekiel hurried forward and bowed reverently to the ground. At that moment, he heard God's voice speaking in his mind. This vision, famously known as Ezekiel's chariot, later inspired the book Chariots of the Gods. God instructed Ezekiel to deliver divine messages to the people of Israel. Ezekiel recorded these divine oracles as prophecies. The book of Ezekiel comprises 48 chapters, with the first 35 chapters detailing the turbulent fate of the Israelites over a period of 2,000 years. These chapters describe how God required the Israelites to atone for their sins, scattering them among neighboring nations that plundered and occupied Israel. The promised land of Canaan, once flowing with milk and honey, would become a desolate wasteland. In chapter 36, the prophecy shifts dramatically. It states that to restore his reputation, Jehovah would bring the scattered Israelites back to the promised land. The barren land would yield abundant crops to sustain the returning population, transforming wastelands into fertile fields. Cities would rise from the ground, and many Israelites would return to become masters of the land, prospering with a growing population. The prophecy emphasizes that after their sins are cleansed, Israel would enjoy bountiful harvests, thriving cities, and fertile lands. Historically, this prophecy aligns with two events. The first is the Babylonian captivity in 587 BCE, which Ezekiel himself experienced. About 50 years later, the Jews returned to their homeland and rebuilt their nation. The second event occurred in 66 CE when the Romans conquered Jerusalem, destroying the Second Temple. This led to the Jewish diaspora, lasting nearly 1,900 years, until the re-establishment of Israel in 1948. Which event does the prophecy refer to? The Babylonian captivity lasted only 50 years, and Canaan did not become a wasteland. After 50 years in Babylon, a new empire defeated Babylon, allowing the Jews to return and rebuild the Second Temple. At that time, Canaan remained fertile, not desolate. Thus, the prophecy in chapter 36 likely corresponds to the re-establishment of Israel in 1948. By the late 20th century, Israel achieved remarkable progress in transforming the Negev desert, even becoming an agricultural exporter, fulfilling Ezekiel's prophecy of barren land becoming fertile. In chapter 37, Jehovah showed Ezekiel another strange vision, a valley filled with dry bones. God's power caused the bones to move, and flesh and blood reformed them into living people. God explained that these dry bones represented the despairing and helpless Israelites. Ezekiel was to prophesy to them, urging complete faith in God, who could revive their spirits. This vision metaphorically compares the Israelites to lifeless corpses, like the walking dead in Chinese folklore, soulless and barely alive. God's teaching was akin to infusing new life, enabling them to truly live again. The prophecy then mentions a crucial point. Jehovah declared that the newly established Israel would encompass both the northern kingdom of Israel and Judah, equivalent to the United Kingdom of Israel from the time of King David and Solomon. Since Solomon's era, only one such large-scale Israel existed, the modern state established in 1948. Thus, the prophecy clearly points to present-day Israel, fulfilling King Josiah's unrealized dream from over 2,600 years ago and strongly supporting the prophecy's connection to post-1948 Israel. Chapters 38 and 39 of Ezekiel seem even more relevant to today's situation. Each time Israel faces an attack, many religious individuals associate it with an apocalyptic war, largely due to these chapters. The prophecy describes that after Israel's re-establishment, it will face a leader named Gog from the land of Magog. This leader will form an alliance to attack Israel. Gog is described as the prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal, with an army like dark clouds covering the land. Israel's forces will fight alone, with little chance of victory. The war will be accompanied by clear cosmic signs visible worldwide, massive earthquakes, hailstones like volcanic eruptions, or fire and sulfur from volcanic activity or a comet striking Earth. These disasters, plagues, and bloodshed will strike Gog's nation and its allies, witnessed globally as the apocalyptic war. So, who is this leader named Gog? Some contemporary biblical scholars suggest that Gog is the leader of Russia, referred to as Rosh in Ezekiel's prophecy, which they equate with modern-day Russia. The prophecy states that the army he leads comes from the farthest north. Geographically, from Israel's perspective, the northernmost country is undoubtedly Russia. The prophecy also lists Gog's allies. Where is the land of Magog? Interpreters believe it spans Central and Western Asia, possibly including some Islamic nations, such as modern-day Afghanistan. Persia clearly refers to present-day Iran. The ancient regions of Meshech and Tubal mentioned in the prophecy correspond to modern-day Turkey. Other allies of Gog include Sudan, in East Africa, and Libya, in North Africa. Notably, aside from Russia, these nations are predominantly Muslim. Let's return to reality to test this. After Israel's establishment in 1948, the four previous Middle East wars primarily involved state-to-state conflicts. Israel's traditional enemies were Syria to the north, Jordan to the east, and Egypt to the south. However, since the 1973 Arab-Israeli War, these state-controlled adversaries have largely ceased to be Israel's immediate neighbors. The only remaining significant state opponent, not an Arab nation, is Iran, ancient Persia. Yet, Iran is not a direct neighbor of Israel, separated by Iraq and Syria. Returning to the recent Israel-Hamas conflict, some online communities have expressed concern. Could this be a precursor to the apocalyptic war? Might it lead to World War III? Based on Ezekiel's prophecy, let's examine the facts. In the current conflict, while Iran and Russia may be covertly supporting Hamas, Russia's leader has not personally sent troops southward, and Iran has not directly attacked Israel. Moreover, Israel is not fighting alone. 2 U.S. aircraft carrier groups have arrived in the eastern Mediterranean to support Israel. Additionally, the cosmic signs mentioned in the prophecy, such as massive fires, earthquakes, or hailstones, have not appeared. Thus, we can infer that the current Israel-Hamas conflict is likely not the apocalyptic war described in Ezekiel's prophecy. As for whether it could escalate into a larger world war, there are currently no clear indications of this. Furthermore, Ezekiel's prophecy offers a path for the Israelites to escape suffering. They must uphold their covenant with God. In return, God promises that once their sins are cleansed, they will prosper again. So, when will the apocalyptic war occur? The prophecy indicates it will happen after a large number of Jews return to Israel. Since Israel's re-establishment in 1948, nearly 80 years have passed, during which many Jews from around the world have indeed returned to settle in Israel. Thus, the prophecy's apocalyptic war feels like it could be imminent. It's no surprise, then, that whenever a crisis erupts in Israel, followers of Judaism and Christianity who believe in the prophecy become deeply concerned. Some argue that while the prophecy seems to align with current events, there are still differences. Could some force have altered the course of history? What do you think? Will the Israel-Hamas conflict lead to a larger war? Do you believe the apocalyptic war prophesied will occur, or is there still hope for humanity? We welcome you to share your thoughts in the comments below the video. That's all for today's discussion. If you found this video or the content on our channel helpful, please share it with a friend to explore together. Thank you so much. Goodbye, and see you next time.